Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our weekly banter with Fletus. Um, Tonight, I am slightly unprepared, but I would look forward to just sharing what I can with you about what's going on this week. So, before we dive in, I just wanted to take a moment to say I appreciate each and every one of you joining tonight. Um, I have a couple things I'd like to talk to, but for the most part, I would like to just open up with any comments or questions that people have. So before we do that, let's think through what this week has been about. So for many of you, you may or may not have had Monday off for President's Day. That allowed me to take some time with the family to reflect and to pause. As I've talked in previous streams, it is important to find avenues to decompress away from the field that we work in. If you're like myself, I manage a team who's responsible for multiple disciplines inside of the field of information security and cybersecurity. So my team has been actively working on prepping for our annual pen test. We are still onboarding and doing operational excellence work after doing an M&A in Q4 of 2024. And then we have the day in the life of a security operations person. So for the next few minutes, I'd just like to talk to you what that's been like for me managing that team and going through a merger and acquisition. For those who have not gone through one before, it's an opportunity to learn and grow. Depending on the organization in which you merge with, you will have opportunities to either acquire new teammates or to find the skill sets in the new org to align with the current org. For us, we've been having the opportunity to figure out how we can mirror their processes with our processes to put on the GRC hat. How do we align their governance, risk, and compliance with the governance and risk compliance that we are doing with inside of the parent company, which my company was during the merger and acquisition. Additionally, my team has had to pick up new architecture, new system design, and be able to learn and grow with the new organization. The blessing that we've had is we've had some good key resources who've been able to meet with us weekly. Due to different time zones, we have nightly meetings due to them being mornings. And it gives us the opportunity. I have another one later this afternoon to just do an engineering security sync. This has been an eye opening experience as not many individuals have the opportunity to work with a global team. So, with my current role, I now have team members inside of multiple continents, not just inside of the continental US, which allows me to understand and appreciate what it's like for organizations to be global. So with that, I'd like to just take the next few minutes to talk through what that's like. First, you need to set expectations. You need to think about how you're going to operate. When you're used to working in 8 to 5 inside of the continental US, that no longer is practical. You have to be flexible. You have to have the ability to change how you operate. If the individuals you are working with are now 8, 10, 12 hours ahead of you, that means you may be taking early morning or late night calls. This gives you the opportunity to have a self respect as well as a humility of dealing with individuals who are in different time zones. I've shared previously, and I'll share again. When I joined my current organization, we were a fully remote company. So we already had different time zones. I sit in the eastern part of the United States, and most of my team is in mountain time. So I already had the 2 hour gap. Now I have an 8, 10, or 12-hour gap, depending on the individuals I'm meeting with. So because of that, I've had to be flexible. You have to do asynchronous communication. So you have to be comfortable sending a message in your Slack or Teams and waiting several hours or a half a day to get a response. You also have to set up key SLAs of more or less to follow the sun model that you would see in a lot of security operations. In this case, we're following the sun in a different manner. I'm cutting tickets and allowing them to update while I'm sleeping, and then they're updating while I'm sleeping. So it gives me the opportunity to, when I wake up and I start my day fresh, to see what's happened overnight and to see what I need to address. It also gives my team the ability to do a lot of work inside of our business hours because it's outside of their business hours. So it gives the opportunity to learn and grow that capabilities. The challenges, though, is you're now waiting. What could usually take minutes to hours is now a half a day to a full dawn task. So when doing project planning and when thinking about incident response or just Engineering, plan ahead. This forces you to sit down and think about your week ahead. What am I going to do? What do I need to accomplish this week? And plan it out. This enables the IT service management piece, the ITSM, understanding how to cut tickets, how to track your work, how to set up sprints and epics if you're running agile or just want to run projects in a manner that can track chore tickets. Additionally, setting up a primary secondary. You may have a peer who is working outside of the US and able to come in when you're now sleeping. So that gives you the opportunity to figure out how you have a cross-functional team and finish finding that center of excellence. So again, I lead a team who's predominantly in the US. My constituents, my peers, my clients, for lack of a better word, are now outside of the US. So I have to be willing and able to accommodate that. So I will hop online in the next 2 hours to meet with several teammates who are now outside of the continental US. So that gives me the opportunity again to figure out how that is. So that leads me into the next piece. What does that mean for security? Um, I've shared before, I run a security operations team and I have a manage and detection piece to my organization. That allows my 24 by 7 to truly be 24 by 7. I'm not having an individual who's having to stay up and work swing shifts, such as the 12 to 8, 10 to 8, 10 to 6, overnight hours. I'm allowing to utilize an MSP, or in my case, a managed detection and response organization. So the first couple times we had alerts, they were coming in around midnight to 1 a.m. my time. When I started to think about that, that's roughly the start of their business day. That's when the individuals are getting on, first getting up to date, and realizing that their day is coming to a start. So I am likely asleep for the next first couple hours. And the first page out, the first incident we had, I missed. So, Fletus, how did you miss it? Well, because I was used to just going to sleep, I had a do not disturb set on. So that phone tree ended up not getting addressed. So when I woke up, luckily I'm an early riser. I happened to check my phone, happened to be able to respond. And in my case, it was an event that could have waited. My MDR was able to isolate the problem. They were able to take action because I had pre approved certain actions, which is the benefit of having an outsourced security operations piece to my team. So, Fletus, what does that again mean for you as a team? They're now a extended extension of my org. I may not directly manage them, but I know that I have coverage. So for again, we had a short week. We had President's Day off. I had coverage on President's Day. For nights and weekends, I have coverage. When we have certain holidays, I have coverage. That's a strong benefit to my organization. It's a good selling point to my customers that we have eyes on glass 24/7, 365 days of the year. So again, think about this a little bit more. When you're trying to find what role you want to fit, I get all asked often, where do I start? What organization do I need to join? Do I want to join a large enterprise or do I want to join a small team? Think about what enables you as an individual. So let's do the SOC. That's the primary question I get, Security Operations Center. Do I want to work with one who's entirely in house? So that means you're likely going to work 8 to 5, or you're going to work 10 to 8 if they run a 12-hour shift throughout the day. Or do I want to work for a provider who has multiple clients where you're not supporting the internal team, but you're watching a single pane of glass or monitoring tools for one to many clients? Both have their pros and cons. The pro of the 8 to 5 is you have a set schedule, you have set clients, you get to learn the architecture, you get to learn the teams, you get to understand their SaaS providers, their identity providers, their IDP, you get to understand how they do business. On the flip side, and if an event happens after 5 p.m. or after 6 or after 8, depending on how you run your shifts, you now have to do an on call. You now have to get paged. You now have to wake up and you have to go back to your desk or drive into the office, depending on the event, and start your response piece. With the MSP, MSSP, or MDR, you have shift work who's allowed to monitor the single pane for one to many clients. So you either will have access to their SIM, their security incident and event management tool, or their SOAR product, their security orchestration automation, and you're working directly out of their tools. Or You have them pipe their data or push their data to your tool sets inside of the MSP, MDR, MSSP, and you have your own logic internally for you to cut rules. You work them and then escalate back either through an email, phone tree, Slack, Teams integration back to the customer so that they understand how to work. Both have their pros, both have their cons, but either way, you're cutting your teeth. Was recently asked to, how long do you stay? How long do you continue to work? Is it okay to have job stacking to job hop? It depends. The favorite answer of cybersecurity. Understanding when and how to move is important. Always take a role that allows you to stretch yourself. You don't want to be comfortable in a role for a long period of time. It's okay to get comfortable in a role because that means you're getting proficient. But eventually you're going to want a new challenge. At that point, you either talk with your manager, talk with a mentor, and figure out what are opportunities for cross training. Is there an ability to move into a new role, have the ability to stretch yourself? If you're a SOC analyst, now go into an IR role or detection engineering role or security engineering, or even pivot out of the operation into a governance, risk, and compliance role. Additionally, it's okay to say, this is not for me. I talked about this in a stream last week. It's okay to exit our field. I've seen many individuals dabble and come in and do this for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and say, this is great, but this is not what I want to make my career. And they pivot back into a finance role, back into a true engineering role, back in either IT or an engineering role of, for example, an operations technology, an OT engineer, et cetera, and go back into the technical roles that are non-cyber, non-IT. That is okay. Hear me again. It is okay to come into this field and to leave this field. Do not get upset with pivoting and then willing to pivot back. So think about that with me again. What I've talked about so far in the last 12, 13 minutes is you're going to have opportunities to work in small teams, large teams. You're going to have the opportunities, depending on where you join, to have fully internal, fully domestic, such as they're all in a single country. Or in the case I've shared for the last 10 minutes or so, I'm now in a global opportunity. I have teammates across the globe who I'm responsible for monitoring detection and response. And I have the ability to use my managing detection organization to help me have 24/7, 365 coverage. So now let's pivot a little bit again. Um, People ask often, what do you do to stay abreast, Fletus? Well, first, I find a community. That could be a Discord community, that could be a Slack community, that could also be getting part of a LinkedIn. It could also be attending conferences. Additionally, it could also be an opportunity for you to go and cross train elsewhere. So, for example, find the opportunity or ask for a day in the life. If you're a SOC analyst and you want to do digital forensics, ask if you can sit down with your DFIR team. If you're a GRC analyst and you want to do SOC, ask if you could do a day in the life. These are okay. These are opportunities to learn at the current company. Latest, you're asking, what if I don't have a DFIR team or a dedicated IR internally? How do I do this? Well, this is where that community comes in. Go to a local meetup, go to an ISAC, um, an ISC2, go to a DEF CON, a Black Hat, a Wow Wow Hacking Fest, and network and get to know people. This is important. And it enables you as a person to see, this is interesting, but not what I want to do, or this is not interesting until I see it, and now you're interested. So piquing the curiosity is important for humans. I was on a stream earlier today, and we were talking about what makes security awareness training boring, and it's usually the reverence. Like, is it relevant to me? Is it timely? Is it appropriate? And also, from the psychologist who was on the call, just thinking about the first time you hear something, you're likely to forget it 70% of the time unless you enable or tell someone, I'm going to test you on this. So that leads me to the question we have in the chats. It's like, what is your insight or recommendation for policies on cross training or shadow days, which I've been talking about? Um, to be honest, it depends again. Depending on the size of your organization, you may be able to spend 1 hour, 4 hours, one day, 3 days, a week of your time away from your team. and sitting down and cross training and understanding. Most organizations that I've seen, it's not written. This is you during your one on ones, during your annual reviews, or during meetings, you sharing with your boss, telling Sally, hey, Sally, I would really like to test the waters on this. And you go meet with Susan, and Susan said, yes, Tuesdays and Thursdays are great days for you to come shadow with Sarah. And Sarah can give you 2 to 3 hours of her time and walk you through the alert queue and others. On the flip side, you may be told, no, you can't shadow, but we can come to you. They set up a conference room, they anonymize the data, and they share with you. Because as many people know, certain roles have a need to know and also what you can share and when you can share. There are certain things, even if you're an employee of the company, you don't always have the ability to be openly share. This is what we're doing. This is what we're in the middle of. This is what we're attacking. But if you get the right partnership, you can sign a mutual NDA, or you can sign policies, or you can state Chatham House rules. What I see here is what stays here. I think that's important. So let me pull that string a little bit more. I know many of you have tight knit groups. Make sure you understand the rules of that group before you start openly sharing logs, issues, tools, and other stuff that you're working with, because you don't want to violate your internal policies by sharing proprietary or confidential information. So you're asking, how do I know what's confidential and what's internal? This is where data classification comes in. Any information that can cause material harm to your organization is considered confidential. Or if you would like your competitor, if your competitor got their hands on it, could they cause an adverse effect to your organization? So always think about what data you're handling and how you handle it. You probably have heard these terms already if you've done policy reviews. You've got your personal identifier information, your PII. You got your personal healthcare information, your PHI. And then you also have what you call as restricted data, which is generally anything that's intellectual property to your organization that's unique to you. You may have copyrighted it, you may have trademarked it. That information you do not want to put in a LinkedIn group, a Discord channel, a Slack community, or a Signal group, unless you have written permission and inside that group there's a legally binding contract that's protecting those people from inadvertently sharing that information. Even if they are, you've likely broken your data classification because, for example, once you've published that data or pushed that data outside the virtual four walls of your organization, you've declassified it. So, Fletus, how did I declassify it? Well, once you send an email, if you don't have end-to-end encryption, the routers and switches and other networks in the body can read that data. That means if they have logging in place, they can make a copy of that data. Well, once that has been copied out onto someone else's server, it is now public domain. Think about that for a second. You were talking about proprietary information. You thought it was fine. And all of a sudden, you sent out an Excel file that was not password protected, was not encrypted, and it bounced across your internet service provider's router. Then it went to the next ISP's router. Then it went to the next router. Then eventually it hit a mail server. Well, if this happened to be an internal mail server, it got decrypted and it's sitting in plain text on that mail server. You just inadvertently shared data because you emailed a sensitive file from your environment to someone else. Well, there is ways to protect it. I talked about it already. You can set up end-to-end encryption between you and the third party. That means you're going to put TLS on it, opportunistic TLS, and you're going to have end-to-end encryption. So no matter what hop it makes, it's still encrypted through every hop, and it's only decrypted once it hits the other mail server. So in this case, from Exchange A to Exchange B, or M365 1 to M365 2, or Google, etc. So think about how you're sharing data. Other ways, when you publish data to a file share, to a SharePoint, to a Google Drive, to whatever you've uploaded, make sure you understand the data classification. Because again, making it personal, once you post or share something, you've lost control of it. So make sure that you understand what you're sharing and how you're sharing. So again, I've talked about in the last 20 minutes the SOC. I've talked about data classification. I've talked about controlling stuff. The next part I'd like to spend a few minutes on is understanding how and when to let's think about how I want to word this. How and when do you want to onboard a new third party? So let's talk about third party risk for a moment, or third party TPRM, so third party risk management. I've been talking about data sharing. Most of us today are not on prem shops. We interact with a third party doing software as a service, also known as SaaS. Hypothetically, your IT shop, your finance team decides they want to integrate with a new third party. This could be a new bank, a new loan office. How do you know that? Do you have policies and procedures that says that step 0 is they fill out a questionnaire? That questionnaire could be your third party risk assessment. On that risk assessment, what do they have access to? Do they have a direct connect? Is it a B2B, business to business connection? Will they have login creds into your systems? Will they have the ability to download data, upload data, share data? And then eventually, what can they do? Next, you want to have legally binding attestations in place that if there was a data breach, an incident, or a responsible disclosure with that third party, that they properly interact with you. This turns into a larger discussion of what would happen during an incident response or incident management piece. You need to understand all the list of vendors that you have in place and who has access to your sensitive data, to continue with the analogy and the illustration I was talking about, email and data around. That third party may have fourth party and fifth party connections as well. You need to talk with them during your quarterly and annual reviews of where they're sharing your data. Do they have a fourth party API that's collecting data? Is that fourth party API collecting PI, such as your social security number? What are they doing with that social security? Do they have rights to access that social security number, and where do they store it? Even if they say they are not pushing it, again, where's your attestation with the fourth party behind the third party piece? So think through how we all have third and fourth party connections. Your third parties likely have third and fourth party connections. After you get to a fourth party and fifth party, you have no legally binding contract unless it's written into your contract that you can go after these. This got a lot of organizations in trouble when they outsourced smaller tasks, which leads me into the last topic I'd like to speak about. Most of our attacks today are coming at our fourth party attacks, our third party. They're not going to attack the large organization. Think about the analogy of a castle. You usually have a moat, there's usually a drawbridge, there's usually turrets, there's usually armed guards. I'm not attacking you from the front door of that or the gate of the castle. I'm going to get through the back door or a window where I can come in sideways because you're expecting a delivery through the service entrance of the castle. That's where your weakness is when you're allowing a third party who is semi-trusted or trusted to come into your environment who could easily be compromised. So let's make that a realistic today. A supply chain attack. Supply chains happen because we outsource our food service, food and beverage, we outsource maintenance, custodial staff, we outsource any other array of things. So going back to our controlled space, let's pull back onto your security operations center. If you don't staff it 24/7, when your janitorial staff comes in at night, do you know who they are? Has a background check been approved on every single individual who comes into that controlled room? Even better, when you come in the next day, do you do a physical walk down to see if a device was plugged into any of your towers or laptops? Have you looked for key logging devices? Have you looked for listening devices? Do you have capabilities to find things that a janitorial staff could have brought in? So, Fletus, you're saying I shouldn't trust my janitorial. No, I'm saying you should vet your janitorial, and likely they're probably making low to minimum wage. It wouldn't take much for an adversary to do collusion. I pay you $5,000 to plug in this USB. I give you $10,000 to install this Raspberry Pi behind their monitor so that I can sniff their traffic. Think about that for a second. We trust the individuals, we don't trust the access they have. I talked about this on another stream that goes back to least privilege. You never want to give unescorted access into a physical controlled room and not have proper controls in place to check for those opportunities for people to bring in something they're not supposed to bring in. Additionally, that can lead to physical loss. Do you know that they're not bringing in a cell phone and taking pictures because you don't enforce a clean desk policy? Again, clean desks are not something we talk about in 2025, but it's easy for us to punch the clock and say, I'm going home and not erase the whiteboard, not remove the printout we put on our desk that has sensitive information by putting it into a locked drawer. Even better, we don't think about it as much for those who work from home. Do you have a clean desk policy at home? Do you lock your home office when you leave it to keep friends, family, pets from coming in? Even the inadvertent pet who walks in and just wants to sit on your laptop for the heat can cause damage. So make sure that you lock and shut down your laptops. Other talked about this in another short I put. Holidays, parties, gatherings. You have people who you know and semi trust in your home. Do they have unescorted access to your home office where they could come in and eventually delete something, steal something, take a photo of something? Because again, you didn't erase the whiteboard that's in your home office. You didn't remove the sensitive notes that's on your post-it notes or the handwritten notes that's on your legal pad that sits in front of your laptop. These are all things you need to think about when it comes to data custodian, data classification, and eventually and evidently physical access. So again, I spent the last 7 or so minutes talking about supply chain, third-party risk, and the inevitable inadvertent insider risk without calling them an insider. So what do I do? Here's your application. If you are going to have custodial staff come into your secure space, likely hire uh, one person to still always be in the office. This is that swing shift and make sure they're there so that there's an accountability for them as much as the others. But Fletus, what if that person is the person that they're doing collusion with? What if they're the one who's being paid off to allow them to stall? That's a risk you have to understand and accept, or put mitigating controls in place by putting a second person into the room. It's much harder to get 3 people involved than it is to get 2 people involved. I lastly mentioned the stuff that we don't think about. I will be the first to admit I do not always properly clean up my home office before I leave. For those who know me and have listened to previous, I have 2 interns. One is 10, one is 8. They have access to my home office at certain parts of the day. They definitely have access to my home office when I am traveling because I allow them to use my desk to do their school and other opportunities to give them an opportunity to change their space. That is a risk that my wife and I has accepted. So again, make sure that you understand the risk that you're accepting by tracking them, pulling out more GRC. This is things that should be part of your risk register. And what needs to go on your risk register? Things that could cause your business material loss, things that will cause you to see financial loss, brand awareness, or anything that's going to cause a negative impact. Sometimes that's simply losing the SME. Sometimes that's data loss. Sometimes that's having a massive turn in a product that you are selling, or having an R&D issue, or missing a deadline. All these things can show up on your risk register. Your remote users should be something you account for. What do they have the access to that they can pull off your corporate network or put down into their home office? Again, on another stream this week, we talked about that, and I've mentioned it numerous times. Your home is a business. It is a home, is the equivalent of a small network. All of us have interconnected devices in our home, from the smartwatches that we wear, the tablets that we use, the laptops that we're sitting on, any Internet of Thing devices in our home. If you don't segment your data correctly, you can have crosstalk. If you're not putting proper tunnels in through VPNs, SSH, having direct endpoints, having a secure web gateway, other tools that you deploy, you could be leaking data inside of your home when you cross between home usage and corporate usage inside of the home that you live in. So think through that a little bit more with me. What risk do you accept every day when you wake up? What risk do you accept every night when you go to bed? It starts with you as the person. Security starts from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. And you should start with the human in mind. If I can educate Fletus or Chris or David or Luke on what to think about before they start their day, I've now at least got them to stop and assess and to think. I am a target, but I'm also your greatest asset. So I need to educate you on what you're going to do. And this leads into the practical piece that I tell my mentees: have predetermined actions. Know what you're going to do before the event happens. This happens with my SOC and my incident response pieces. If we see this fish, this is what we're going to do. If we see this social engineering, this is what we're going to do. They're called playbooks, run books. You should have those in your individual and personal lives as well. We all know what to do when someone knocks on our front door. We all know in 2025 what we can and cannot give out over the phone when it comes to our credit card, our personal information. Think about that from your phones, your tablets as well. What are you comfortable giving away? What are you not comfortable giving away? What risks do you accept by doing business from your home office versus a coffee shop, the airport, or going into your physical office? And what information are you giving away in transit? For example, do you wear your badge in public places? Do you have public conversations on speakerphone? Do you have public conversations even with your your AirPods in, audibly sharing sensitive information about yourself, your family, your organization, or your company? I have a cat who's made an appearance. Let's remove said cat. And then additionally, how do you go about protecting yourself from inadvertently giving away information? Again, what do you open in that coffee shop? What do you open in that airplane seat or that public transportation that could be shoulder surfing? So I'm 30 minutes in now. I want to stop. Thank you for joining in and just recap again. We talked about security operations and jobs and the size that you work for. We've talked about how do you handle data? Do you understand data classification? Do you understand how to label it, how to share it to make sure you don't declassify it? We've talked about supply chain and third party risk management. And lastly, we've talked about how do you manage the risk of doing business wherever you work, your home, the plane, the coffee shop. All of these are important for us to reflect on. So it is now Wednesday, February 19th. We are 6 weeks, 7 weeks into the year. Are you aware of what risk you've avoided and accepted already in 2025? If not, reflect on that tonight. Think about what you can do and understand what you will do when and if you are in a certain situation by having predetermined actions that you can reflect on. I'll pause for any other questions from the audience. I've put up the chat so that people can see what I've answered so far, and I appreciate each of you joining before I sign off. So, with that, I thank each and every one of you for your time tonight. Please like and subscribe before you leave. I will continue to put out daily shorts Monday through Friday around my security awareness topics. You will see most of them are around human centric this week. I will ladder the week with Sec DevOps, so feel free to let me know what you think there. And then finally, I post another short little video. This coming Mondays will be around cyber threat intel. Please take a look at it. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. And again, I appreciate your time. Appreciate each and every one of you for being in this community. And remember, you is what makes this secure, not the tools, not the processes. It's the people who enable us inside of information security, cybersecurity to be effective. So share knowledge, learn cheaply, and ultimately stay safe and stay secure.